Judy Wood is nothing if not a critical thinker. This is the thing most misunderstood about Dr. Wood. Her way of approaching a problem has become so foreign to this culture of instant everything that she's an anomaly, unwilling to move along faster than the evidence when it comes to investigation. The act of critical thinking is a defiant one in this present world of conjecture, assumption, expectation, and intolerance. After all, intolerance itself comes out of a rather self-centered and emotionalized view of the world. We cut off thought in the same way that we cut people out of our lives when we have jumped to conclusions about their innermost being, revealing our own most superficial self in the process. Critical thinking is about authenticity, a quest for understanding rather than a need to be right. It's a selfless act that flies in the face of those who have drawn conclusions. No wonder they don't want to be blinded by the light. This is a synthesis of our live on-air conversation via YouTube. I hope you're surprised in some way by what you are about to hear from Dr. Judy Wood over the next hour.
Well, my example of the lack of critical thinking was, global warming or climate change being a problem. Climate changes. I mean, it's not the same. It was raining today, and it wasn't raining yesterday. So you're always correct when you say it's climate change.
Right.
You don't have to prove anything.
You can't go wrong with that.
Right. And I think that's why it was changed from global warming to climate change. First, they tried to say it was getting colder, we were heading into an ice age, and then they decided to can that and try, global heating or something.
When Gore was talking about global warming, he was really being very, very specific about, the glaciers are melting, the polar bears are dying.
Which glaciers and at what time of year? And is it in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? Well, my understanding is that currently the northern hemisphere is warming up a little bit and the southern hemisphere is cooling off a little bit. And apparently there hasn't been so much ice at the South Pole for quite a while. So the heat's migrating or whatever. But by how much? 1 degree or half a degree or 0.001 degrees or whatever in 100 years. Well, it's always changed. I mean, we used to have an ice age, and we're coming out of an ice age. So, of course, it would be getting a little bit warmer all the time. And somebody gets worried about the rising oceans by 0.1 centimeters or something. But if you look at what it's been throughout history, since the ice age, of course, the waters start coming up a lot. Then they come up less and less and less. We're on that plateau. Critical thinking.
Yes,
critical thinking. That panic. We have to. Get rid of coal and diesel fuel and all that, car fuel, and go to electricity.
Yes.
Okay, how's that going to help things? Or go to solar panels. It's to give a boost to the solar panel industry or what?
Well, the interesting thing about this whole question is not only how is it going to affect us in our part of the world, but a lot of people don't realize that if we go to the idea of solar power and eliminate electricity, we're actually really devastating the third world countries.
That's right.
Contrary to popular belief, they don't generate enough solar power even to keep their refrigerators.
Oh, you want them to cut down the rainforest so they can have more solar fields or what? It's kind of ridiculous. Where are the people in the jungle supposed to put their solar panels? But this is what critical thinking it should be about: is questioning the various stories. It's like what's good for these people right here is good for the whole planet.
What's good for me is good for the whole planet.
Well, who says it's even good for you? It's all this panic, and without any proof. And I just learned today that the deal about, they say 97% of scientists agree with whatever. Well, it depends on how the questionnaire is worded. Yeah. The questionnaire was worded something like is oxygen and is CO2 related to temperature?
Right.
Yeah, mildly it is. Well, that's all the question was about.
Mm-hmm.
But they're acting like that's proof that it's man-made global warming.
Well, that whole question of the 97% of scientists is really interesting, because it's, you say something enough times and people start to believe it. Just like school, it's rote learning, isn't it? It's this
right.
is what you're supposed to believe, and yet if you go back, you see that it was a very tiny little sampling, and a lot of those so-called scientists.
But not just that.
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's the questionnaire. They're asking one question, but making you think a different question was asked.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend whatever. This is one I learned from the 60s. My uncle is a doctor, and he explained if you don't have time to go through your junk mail and respond to it, it's written in the survey that they take it as a positive response if you don't return the survey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So 4 out of 5 doctors don't return the survey, so they say it's recommended.
Well, this somebody in the chat says, I thought the 97% statistic had been disproven recently. It's
not disproven. You got to figure out what they even ask the people. If they ask the people if atmospheric CO2 is related to temperature, of course it is. Yeah, but plants are growing more, and people are growing more. There's a lot more activity. You're going to have more activity if the temperature's warmer. But that has nothing to do with why the temperature's warmer.
So from a critical thinking point of view, a person would actually have to go back and take a look at the study itself to even weigh in.
Exactly.
On whether there was 97% or 2% or whatever. A person would need to go back, take a look at the context, take a look at the question itself, and then do the
What were they
research.
agreeing to? Yeah, 4 out of 5 doctors recommend whatever. Well, what was the survey? Mm-hmm. If you look at the survey, you can see that a no response was taken as a positive response. And maybe that's the same thing with this. Who knows?
On that note, we're looking at the idea of critical thinking in schools, and there have been a few teachers that have been on that have on the chat, and also weighing in after I put the video up, saying, well, in my classroom, I'm teaching critical thinking. So there's a sense in which critical thinking can be part of the curriculum. And I guess I have a problem with that idea. What about you?
Yeah, because, for this moment, we're going to discuss critical thinking. We're not going to apply it, it just as a routine, but we're going to just discuss it for one moment here or there. As being part of the curriculum is kind of ridiculous. What is learning? To me, I think teachers, to be effectively teaching, it's about teaching the person how to learn, not teaching them how to memorize. Memorization is not learning.
It's not a matter of criticizing the teachers or even the school system per se, but it's a matter of looking at what is critical thinking and how can I apply it personally.
Yeah, actually, I really feel badly for teachers. They went into the profession wanting to teach the right things and to teach how to learn. But the school system regulations have gotten worse and worse, so they're not allowed to do that. Their hands are tied. They lose their job and they're replaced by someone who will teach the kids how to memorize this list of talking points.
Right.
And so that is a problem.
You've been a college professor, university professor, and so how did you find that when you were in that role?
Well, what I did, I taught them various tools throughout the semester, and then towards the end of the semester, I brought in a bunch of stuff. Yonder's a pile of stuff. Figure out what the material properties are of the stuff, in at least two or three different ways. And you got some really neat creativity, and you also had some people just standing there kind of, looking dumbfounded, but then they saw that other people were going to it, and so they did. They learned how to calculate the beam bending equation based on what the modulus was, and so they get this. It was a rubber beam, clamp it down, and then measure its deflection. And, they started being creative, and I love that. That, to me, was a treat. Mm-hmm. Watching them figure out how to solve new problems with the building blocks that they'd learned.
Right. So first of all, you set things out. You laid things out in terms of the principles.
Right. Right. That's a part of the required, teaching of the course is learn what these equations are, what those equations are, and then we got ahead, so we had time at the end to do this the practical experience thing, and that's sort of one of my objectives. I also like to bring in like a disaster. I was known as the disaster queen because I like to talk about disasters. What went wrong. My pride and joy, probably the peak of my career here, is about right after the space shuttle came apart on trying to do reentry, the Challenger. I mean, I knew. I just did a quick calculation, and then I went into the class, on Monday and said, "You guys ought to know this." Oh no, the tiles came off. They always come up. No, you need them for reentry because those are your brake pads that are smoking. It's right. And if you lose those, you're a goner. And why wouldn't they? I was angry, and actually talk about. Remembering the day JFK was shot, I told the students, I said, "You're going to remember this day." Your teacher got mad because it was easily foreseeable. And they said, "Well, wait, if NASA can't figure it out, how do you expect us to?" And I said, "Well, you guys, we just covered thermal expansion on your test. I mean, and we're going to have a test, and maybe I'll put this on the test." And so I did put that problem on the test. This is months before you got anything publicly known. And I was kind of proud of myself for that. I looked up some material properties of the various parts, and where I saw debris hitting the wing, if it comes down and it shoots out at a right angle turn, that's a big impact. That's not grazing, and different things like this. So I picked where it was. It wasn't where the officials said it was, but it's where I decided it was. And I made up the test, and I told the students I wasn't going to start the clock until they understood the problem. And if this looked too scary for them, here, pretend it's a cartoon over here. And I drew them a cartoon problem, and then I said, because here's what we're assuming in developing this problem, and I want you to have this sheet. Because in 6 months or so from now, you'll see that we were right. And then I turned them loose, and it was 2 months after that the NASA people updated their understanding that it was a different part that went wrong. Was where it was already on my test correctly, and also, what the question was, what temperature rise would cause your first failure, and consider these three cases. And you know what that temperature rise was?
Well, I wasn't in your class, so how am I supposed to know?
315 degrees Fahrenheit before you get your first failure.
Uh-huh.
And then when,
my
a couple
truck gets that hot, I think.
Uh-huh. And a couple of months later, they found the flight data recorder, the equivalent of that, that recorded the stuff. They had some strain gauges right where, I picked the injury to the wing. And it went offline between 310 and 320 Fahrenheit. How's that? We're right on target. You bet the students were just thrilled to death. But of the test itself, 1/3 got it completely right, 1/3 kind of got it right, the other third didn't try because they said, well, if NASA can't figure it out, how do you expect us to? And that's the problem. That's lack of critical thinking. I'd always wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, who doesn't? And so that's why it was like a personal attack, kind of. It was personal. Mm-hmm. That they downloaded all the data these people collected, then just kind of, let them go to their death. It was just horrid. But the idea of anyone who knew how to do basic calculations could figure it out. If you have a hole in the wing and you have all this hot air coming in as the thing is descending, I mean, the thing's, glowing red hot when it comes to reentry. So what is that temperature going to do to the various parts inside? Mm-hmm. Like, imagine you have an aluminum strut going from the bottom edge of the wing to the top edge of the wing, and that suddenly expands more than the stuff around it. It's going to pop out and rip the wing off. And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And one of the students came out like in August or September or something, and one of the students was on a co-op job, and he pulled out his test paper, went running around showing all his colleagues. He was so proud of it. He said, "See, we got it right."
Well, that's incredible. Like on a couple of different levels, talking about the space shuttle and the fact that those kids were learning something, actually learning, and the other side of it is that information goes right into that person's brain, heart, soul. It becomes part of them, as you say. They'll remember that day. They remember everything about it.
Yep. And learning how to simplify a problem, you don't have to have it to 10 significant digits, but to get the general idea, to simplify it. Like you've seen the billiard ball example or exercise I have in my book.
Right.
That's just a mental exercise. That's a real simplification. But once you see that simplification, you go, oh, wow, that other story can't work. You don't have to have the exact number of, digits. I'm not predicting how long it should have taken the buildings to come apart. I'm just showing that even just a free fall of a billiard ball in air, the timing of that, it takes longer. So you know that anything less than that is wrong. And it's being able to use those basic, everything, if you understand it, everything can be boiled down to a very basic, simple level.
That one's a really good one because I use it myself and I can actually understand it, amazingly enough.
Which?
The billiard ball. I use it when I'm talking about the free fall of the towers, so that when people are trying to get a sense of how quickly the towers came down, we don't need to talk too much about pancaking and that sort of thing, because you can start to get into some, I'm not a scientist, and I just know what I see and what seems real and what doesn't seem real to me. So the billiard ball, which is not
exercise. No, for example, it's just an analogy kind of thing, just to get your brain working. Because if you talk about flying bodies and buildings turning dust, people have trouble seeing the facts through that. So you simplify it. You take it off to this parallel story about billiard balls. People can handle that. That's not. It doesn't freak them out. Mm-hmm. But then once they figure that out, then they go back to the dustification story, and they see the issue in there.
It's an interesting one. I just talked to somebody about this, and I usually wait for a while before I start getting into the 9/11 thing, because I sort of suss people out a little bit. But then usually the first question I have is, how do you think that those buildings came down? And
did they come down?
Disappeared.
Came apart.
So, I was talking about dustification, and they said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, you know how scientists come up with new words to explain something that is
a new phenomenon.
That's a new phenomenon. Well, and that was interesting, too, because that was a great way to address it. Rather than going, dustification is this, that, and the other thing. It's a new phenomenon, and it has a new word.
But also, it's a placeholder, too. It's this phenomenon. Now we got to figure out what this is. If you immediately assign it a name, even though you don't know what it is, like say, it's vaporization, you're assuming high heat. Or if you say smoke, you're assuming fire to be the cause. So all these other words, doesn't matter what it actually is. If you don't know for sure what it is, just label it with a placeholder. Mm-hmm. And a word that isn't already occupied by something known that'll be confused with.
Because like I would, that's unknown. That's the whole point, is that you're introducing.
But if you don't necessarily know it's unknown, but until you know it's what it is, you have to give it a name to refer to the phenomenon. Just like I talk about Cheetos. Well, we're not going to confuse something that looks red hot glowing pipe with a snack food. So that's why I would use it, because it was a good placeholder. Like, what's going on here? We have this luminescent steel pipe. Right. What's with that? And what are you going to call it? You can't say red hot because you don't know if it's hot.
Right.
So I would use these placeholders like Cheetos. It's a Cheeto fire that also let you know something weird was going on, like weird fires or Cheeto fires.
Mm-hmm.
That they aren't normal fires. You haven't determined that.
So these are the things that you taught me about critical thinking, and I think that it's just a practice. It's almost like a Zen practice of just going back all the time to not having any assumptions. That's the only way I can put it.
Right. And then go to a magic show and apply it there. You'll see how they con you. They get you to make the wrong assumption, usually visually by distracting you onto something else or calling something else. They don't lie to you. They get you to lie to yourself. Right. They get you to solve the wrong problem, so you're assuming something is the problem when it's not. And then you go down some tangent trying to solve that erroneous problem, so you don't see what's really going on. Like the most obvious one is where they break the deck open, have somebody pick a card, any card, and don't let me see where you're putting it back in. Don't let me see where you're putting it back in. So they make all this big focus on that, and then shuffling the cards so that you don't know where that card is in the deck that they put back in, and then all different kinds of shuffles and so forth, and miraculously they pull out the right card.
Mm-hmm.
So people are busy thinking it's how do you keep track of where that card got put in the deck, instead of he knew what card it was before the person picked it. So he arranged them to pick that card,
mm-hmm.
and so he knew what card it was. But the whole focus is on keeping the deck, shuffling the deck afterwards, and not seeing where they put it in the deck. And so you're focusing on that problem to solve rather than the trick was upstream from that.
Well, for me, the whole idea of theater has helped me to understand that concept too, because being a director of a play, you're always having something going on in the shadows. You're changing the scene while you have the light over here, and you've got the people doing something very dramatic. And it's the art of distraction.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Simple.
It's a magic trick.
In certain ways, a magic trick. The more deft you get at doing that, the easier it is to con people, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. I just saw it as entertainment. This is a discussion on critical thinking with Dr. Judy Wood on Character-Driven, CHLY 101.7 FM. My biggest struggle has been teaching. Okay, maybe in teaching. Certain required content and holding my tongue. Has been teaching certain required content and holding my tongue. Okay, so what do you?
That's the biggest problem. Oh, that's a tough problem. I mean, that's in like elementary school and junior high and maybe even high school. It's a more difficult problem than what I had in college. You have content you can teach them in engineering. That's there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it, and then you apply that to other things. But if the curriculum, like in elementary school, is designed for memorize, regurgitate. That's hard to deal with the amount of time you have, and I think it would be important to have the students apply something. Do you know if this is true? What tests could we come up with to determine if it's true? Anybody have any ideas out there?
Right.
Like when I do a derivation of an equation on the board, it's the job of the students in the class to watch where that equation comes from. They don't have to be able to replicate it, but they have to be able to convince themselves this equation they're going to get at the end is indeed true and what it's based on.
How they arrived at that conclusion.
Or, you don't just feed them an equation, say plug and chug like a mindless idiot. I want them to know the basis of the equation, where the equation came from. I don't require them to be able to rederive it, but to understand enough about where it came from to know that to convince themselves that it is correct, not just blindly swallow something.
Right.
And that's one important thing about doing proofs or derivations on the board. Is for folks to understand where it comes from. Now, with regards to history and other things, I'm at a loss. That's just all storytelling. Mm-hmm. History, his story.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their story.
Sometimes there's a her story, but mostly it's history. This person is in elementary school, so can you maybe get take that analogy of, dissecting things and putting things on the board and move it into something a bit more practical for an elementary school teacher?
Like I say, with history or whatever, that's harder to do, except, stress that it's his story or her story, not that it's fact. Mm-hmm. And maybe think of some examples like, in the 70s, late 70s, everybody thought it was going to be a catastrophe, that we had an ice age coming on. And the economy's going to bottom out, and everybody panic and run, the sky's falling. And then a little bit later, you get this other thing. Or doing the history of this causes cancer, and then a few years later, no, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. It helps get rid of cancer. Back and forth. There's those kind of games. Or eggs make your cholesterol go up. But that was the egg replacement industry probably wanting to get a boost, and then they later decided, I guess it doesn't. Even for athletes, for a while they're saying don't drink milk products because it has lactic acid in it. Well, lactic acid in your stomach and in your muscles and bloodstream are two different things.
Yeah. It's not accumulating in your kneecaps.
Right. When you put it in your stomach, but it's these various myths that get going. And if I had to teach history, probably that's what I would focus on. Is that, well, this is the story right now, but it'll change. But how do we determine what's what, for ourselves? And to stress that, and stress how can we test this concept. Mm-hmm. No, I wasn't around 400 years ago, 300 years ago. I don't know who fought what battle and who did what to whom when, and they're stories. That's why I never got too interested in history, I guess. Except there are some general trends to focus on, like this is what people do. People like to beat up on other people or like to pretend that they're beating up on someone else. And why do they do that? Let's look at the outcome. Right. Oh, they get to raise taxes on them.
Well, that's it. I think that helps when we're coming up with ideas about what's happening in the news, even. Just taking a look at it with that kind of I guess it's not skepticism, but a critical eye, where we can see what's happening over here. Like you say, what is the magic trick? What's happening over here that's going to affect what's happening on the other side of the room?
Yeah, like let's look at the event of 9/11. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the outcome. What's happened since? Why do we need a microchip? People, because of 9/11. Why just this and this? Because of 9/11. Because of 9/11. And that might be getting worn out, so they need a new one, like because of climate change. Right. Yeah. They both have the same effect. Right. It's a way of putting new orders on society that they normally wouldn't put up with.
Right. So really what we're doing when we're teaching kids, like elementary school kids, we're not saying, the government does this. I mean, I've had people say that to me. I don't like the way you talk about the government. When in fact what I'm trying to say is take a look at this incident and see for yourself whether planes can actually do that kind of damage to a building, that kind of thing, because they want to jump to the conclusion that I'm criticizing the government or saying that it is not as advertised before they entertain the question itself. Like they can't stay with the question, which is, do you think planes can do that kind of damage to the building?
And they also don't seem to be able to stay with the idea of just what can we know that we know. They need to jump to an answer.
That's such a
and
good
when
one.
you jump to an answer, you start cherry picking what will support your answer versus what is really there. So it blinds you to the truth by jumping to an answer.
Know what you know, and that's something that you keep saying over and over.
Oh, yeah.
Saying in my head, I have the Dr. Judy part of my brain going, know what you know, and don't even bother with the rest. And
because that's just speculation.
Back. That's speculation.
Yeah, you can't solve a crime on speculation. Look at the Casey Anthony one. They hadn't solved the crime. Instead, they tried to just make people think, oh, she's an evil person. See, she must be a bad person. So it's like a Salem witch hunt. I'm not saying she's innocent or guilty or whatever, but they didn't have evidence of what happened. Mm-hmm. They already had decided what the answer was, and then cherry picked whatever to get there. That also apparently is done with the climate change business. Now, I'm going to give you an analogy. If I give you 5 dimes, what's the average value of those coins?
It's 5 times 10 divided by 5, right? It's a,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, if I replace 2 of those coins with 2 quarters.
Oh, shoot.
I won't make you work on that one. But is the average value going to be higher or lower?
Okay, yeah.
So you go from 5 dimes, and the average is going to be 10 cents, and then you take out 2 dimes and put in 2 quarters. Obviously, the average value is going to go up.
Go up. Yeah, of course it is.
All right. So
I would be terrible in your class.
So the climate change business does just the same thing. Okay. They throw out the low data and add in more high numbers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the average will go up.
So who's collecting this data in the first place? Because a lot of it is collected off of tarmacs, airplane tarmacs.
Where it is.
Areas. Where it's placed. I want to know that. And once I started to understand that there was a question about that, I started to do my own research.
Right.
You can go online and you can find out where these things are located.
But right away, when I heard about, there's so many more hurricanes now than there used to be. How do they know that? How long have we had satellites that observe where hurricanes are? Because before you had satellites, you could only determine there was a hurricane if it made landfall.
Right.
Most of them spin around in circles or out in the middle of the ocean and die out. You don't ever see them come to shore.
No, or if you happen to be a ship out there and you can tell the story.
Right, and you just disappear.
These
or you disappear.
They come in and they tell you, hey,
okay,
it's a really bad hurricane out there. I just got washed up on shore.
Maybe that's what the Bermuda Triangle is all about. That's where a lot of the hurricanes tend to go through.
Okay, speaking of that, can I just ask a question? Because these poor people in the chat they have questions. One was asking about Atlantis, which is kind of interesting. I mean, that's a whole other subject. Just what she was wondering about your ideas about Atlantis, because you said Bermuda Triangle, so I had to throw that in.
Well, Bermuda is a real place. Mm-hmm. And there's this myth that airplanes or boats and stuff disappear there. Well, it could be they have a lot of weird weather. Who knows? Now that we have satellites, we see that that's where hurricanes tend to turn and go up. Before they make landfall to the continent, they turn and mow down Bermuda. It's out in the middle of nowhere, out there in the ocean. So there's a reason why you would have more ships lost in that area. Because you don't see the hurricane, ship just never comes home. They don't come home, and so that could be one of the reasons for the Bermuda Triangle myth or story getting going, because that would be a place where people get swallowed up by hurricanes without anybody knowing what hit them.
You're listening to Character Driven on CHLY 101.7 FM. So that goes back to history, because a lot of what history is what we don't know. It's what we assume because,
Exactly. Good job. Good. Excellent.
Things.
I don't know how many people have experienced the eclipse this past summer, the total eclipse.
Didn't we all experience it? Well, you're saying...
Well, you have to be on the line where it's going to be total. If you're off the sign, it's not total. But it's a very strange phenomenon. Where I was on the edge of a cow pasture, and the cows, they all went stampeding to the woods. They were freaked out. And it made me think about what humans were probably like, however many years ago, when they had no idea what was going on. The sky's falling, the world's ending. And the amount of anxiety it caused them.
Right.
And also the birds, it was like a 1 minute long dusk and a 1 minute long dawn afterwards, where the bugs are out and then they go away.
What's going on?
It was nighttime. It was and the birds stopped chirping. They start chirping again when at dawn. Even though it was like 2.5 minutes or so of total darkness. It was pretty incredible. But to realize we now have a better understanding of what that process is, but if we didn't, Imagine all the stories that be made up and told about history. And then an explanation of, people have to jump to the answer of why the lights came back on. So you can't jump to any conclusion, just like with the Flight 370 issue. I don't know if I talked about that last week or not, that, where'd that Malaysian Airlines go? Well, did it go up here, go down here, over here? Where's Waldo? I first asked, was there such a flight? Did it take off? And if it did take off, which direction was headed in? If I don't know any of those answers, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
You don't speculate beyond that. I mean, you can't go past that. But the media kept every day saying, maybe it's over here, maybe it's over there. It was really silly. That's why I say it was a Where's Waldo event. It was, maybe it's down here, maybe it's, phenomenon. Phenomenon will tell you a whole lot. Like, what does a phenomenon tell us that we observe? We can rule out that fire destroyed the buildings. We can rule out a gravity collapse. We can rule out bombs in the building. We can rule out, the thermite or whatever. So we can rule out all that stuff easily.
Mm-hmm.
The buildings didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They mostly turned to dust in midair. Therefore, something that can mostly turn a building to dust in midair must exist.
Does exist. Right.
Yeah, it must. We don't need to show you the serial numbers on it. That we know that a technology that can do that must exist. You look at it, you don't have to say, I hope you don't say, oh, that must mean that this caused it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ray beam from outer space. No, it's stupid. What you say is looking at the totality of the evidence. Like the lack of significant seismic signal or appropriate seismic signal, there wasn't an S or P wave detected with any of the events in Manhattan on 9/11. That's astonishing.
Particularly when you look at the fact that it was built in the bathtub, as they called it, and then
that wasn't destroyed. For the trolls out there, I didn't say it wasn't damaged. I said it wasn't destroyed. We still kept the Hudson River out.
Right.
You didn't see the whole of the hole flooded out. The bathtub wasn't flooded. So it did keep the Hudson River out. Now, of course, it's going to be later be damaged by the earth-moving equipment because it didn't have the inside structure to support the inside of the wall. So when you start moving heavy-duty equipment over the outside of the wall, it's going to start messing things up. But as for something crashing down on it, it didn't destroy it. That's a piece of data. But also, if you hit a tuning fork, it rings.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't ring, did you even hit it? and so the ground, the P wave, it's like a tuning fork whack. There's no P wave. Actually, for Building 7's demise, they calculated when the P and S waves should have arrived, and there was absolutely no disturbance in the seismic signal.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that need explanations. That how can a collapse of the ground explain that? Yeah,
first of all, they need explorations, and I think that's one of the problems is that folks have not considered some of these things. And even if you go back and take a look at the building of the World Trade Center and how that process went, it will help to see the foundation and see the fact that they had to put up this 70-foot wall and then create this bathtub. You sort of go back to the basics, which was really helpful for me too. It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You can go back and take a look at it. And
you have to begin with what happened. Rather than assuming what happened, you have to determine what happened. Again, the Casey Anthony thing, they assumed what happened. That's theorizing.
Yeah.
So they're trying to solve an assumed problem, not determine the real problem.
Do you think that the word theory is brought in, I guess, even in the scientific method, in order to keep us on this level of we'll never know, we'll never be able to figure it out?
Oh, for sure. And anyone who refers to my work as a theory, that's a disinformation. That means they either repeat stuff they heard from someone else, or they know so little about what science is. So they're not worth listening to, if that's what they're saying. I only show evidence. I let the reader come to their own conclusions. I do conclude at the end of the book what things have been determined as fact. For example, we don't have any big seismic signals of something hitting the ground, no P waves or S waves. Just summarizing those things that have been covered. But there's no theorizing about anything, so there's no theory. And I don't talk about who did it, so it's not about a conspiracy, not about conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. And that's another interesting thing is they often try to get people to feel proud of having conspiracy theories, saying we're picked on. You can't solve a crime based on a conspiracy theory. You have to have evidence. Buildings were much heavier on the bottom. You didn't need as much steel near the top because it wasn't carrying so much. Now at the bottom, you have these 4-inch thick box beams. The wall thickness is 4 inches thick, and at the top they're pretty small. And but I just easily just simplified it and divided it by the weight divided by height or whatever, and made it as though it were uniform. So I'm overestimating the height of like 16 or 20 stories at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So nobody can argue about it.
Right.
And
giving them the benefit of the doubt. Right. And then even if you include in there parts of Building 3 going away at the same time, that's even, maybe that's compensate for the whole thing. But you can't argue that it's more than 20 stories or more than 16 stories. There's no argument for that. Mm-hmm. And so that's the point of it. It wasn't, none of this is for what did happen. It's more of an example like the billiard ball thing of mental exercise, but just kind of like a ballpark thing, because you're not going to have everything justified and then everything not justified. But it also gives you just an understanding. If that bottom 16 stories was one, or say 20 stories was 20. But 110ths of the building, because it's 110 stories tall, if it was uniform weight, and then you drop that to the ground, it would make approximately the same surface wave as what was recorded. That's a big statement right there. How do you explain the other 90 stories or 94 stories or whatever? Where'd that go? Right.
So here, let's make it simple. It was like it was 8 seconds that the ground shook when the North Tower went away. It takes like around 9.5 seconds to drop a bowling ball off the roof of the tower and have it hit the pavement below. But the ground only shook for 8 seconds. Here's another thing. One of the first things I was pointing out to folks, like maybe on day one, is they're talking about where all this dust came from. It's from one floor smacking on the other one and breaking up all the concrete. And okay, if you want to play that game, that next floor has to be rigid and sitting there still in order for the floor above it to smack against it. It can't act like a shock absorber. So if you're going to say that's where all the dust is coming from, you can't have this, what do you call it, dustification, as well as the whole building accelerating down faster. It doesn't work. If the one floor is smacking on the other one, it has to be rigidly, strong. Otherwise it'd be a shock absorber. So we're talking about real, just straightforward, simple things. But to think of the timing now, to understand what that timing is like, I think of the world's records for a mile as being 4 minutes. It's slightly faster than that, but let's talk about a 4-minute mile. It's essentially the same. So that means a quarter of a mile is going to be 1 minute if he's going at the same pace. So these towers are a quarter of a mile tall. So let's mentally turn the building sideways and have this world record holder racing the building demise. It would take him a minute to get from one end to the other, not 8 seconds. Mm-hmm. Do you realize how fast 8 seconds is? Yeah, or the other trick I do is, or not trick, the other exercise I do is, how many times can you clap in 8 seconds?
Right, 110 times.
Now, there's somebody who can do that, the world record holder, Guinness Book of World Records. He can do a double clap with a, I don't know how he does it with his hands, but I don't know anyone else who can.
Do you think, can you
clap that many times?
110 in that time?
Yeah, because he doesn't, it isn't just regular clapping with his fingers. He's using the palm of his hand as well.
Oh, I see. So
he's doing some tricks there with his. That's right. But for regular clap, 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 you can't do that. You can't do 110 claps in 8 seconds.
Oh, you're giving people a lot to think about, because I've heard a lot of this before, but it's so interesting because it gets your brain going on so many different subjects. It's just not possible, and you can try all the tricks you want to make it possible, but it's not. It's like the climate change thing we were talking about earlier. So that's what we're really trying to teach kids, to have it in their own head and their own psyche that this isn't possible, so that when the other people are coming at them with all these theories, they can say, well, that's not. Well,
let's see. Yeah, first determine what happened. Yeah, you got to start with what happened.
This is a discussion on critical thinking with Dr. Judy Wood on character-driven CHLY 101.7 FM.
The hand clapping and exercises easily show you that the story you're given doesn't work. And so then you need to then figure out what happened, because what they're telling you happened doesn't work.
Good place to start. I think that's that, and for the teachers, I think that's a good place to start. If things aren't adding up, if 2 + 2 is equaling 5.
But not just that, but everything you should begin with what happened. Like let's look at the political scene with Trump colluding with Russia. Okay, what did he do? What happened? Exactly. If you're going to make that accusation, you have a reason for it, don't you? You have the evidence. What evidence do you have? Please show us.
Even if we did collude with Russia, or even if the people involved did collude, then
what did they do?
Change the outcome of
what
of
they
the
do to. Yeah, thanks. Here's another parallel that you often hear. The truthers have all these talking points they do, like, Bush's brother or cousin was doing such and such, or worked for some security company, and put options, stand down orders, and that stuff. What does that have to do with what happened to buildings?
Right.
And people can get really easily distracted by that kind of thing, and that's what I think the Russia collusion thing is. People don't care if there's no evidence; they just like that line.
Right.
The assumption, just like thermite must have done it. Okay, what does thermite do? It's an IQ test. Thermite cannot turn buildings into dust in midair in an instant. So it's, why are you talking about thermite? To distract away from the evidence?
So a lot of the people that have been put out there as the magicians are really, their whole role in life is to distract, and we buy into that.
Or to get people to follow them and then repeat it. There's so many people who repeat these idiot talking points, like, Bush's brother and Larry Silverstein and blah, blah, blah. And as you're pointing out with the others, like, okay, what did they do? What did the Russian folks do colluding that caused the election to do something different? They never show that evidence, that connection. And you have to show the connection between what happened and the outcome.
So when we bait it with a lot of emotional
bingo
charged words.
Oh, glad you brought that up. That does it, emotions. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's why I was doing the billiard ball thing, to get away from the emotions. I hadn't said that word. But yeah, it isn't emotions. And that's, people coming out of the windows and falling bodies, exploding buildings or whatnot. That's emotional. And then people can't see the simplicity of the physics through that. So you put it onto billiard balls and they can see it, because it takes the emotions out. Yes.
Kind of an Occam's razor there. I love that concept that the simplest answer is usually the right one.
Oh, no. That's that's a magician's description. What Occam's razor is the explanation that makes the least number of assumptions.
Okay, sorry.
See, if you know all the things for a fact, then you don't make any assumptions. So that's the best answer.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you cleared that up.
Because the truthers tend to say, oh, the simplest one. The simplest one is this firecracker did it.
Good distinction, yes.
Okay, or even, they say thermite did it. Okay, how'd the thermite get there? Yeah. And who put the thermite there, and how simple is that explanation?
Well, I guess.
And how to get all wired up, and
I think I'm thinking about the billiard ball explanation, where you just go, this goes this fast, this goes this fast, and then there's two things together. That's an explanation of the fact that
just the
faster
physics
than a billiard ball. When you were talking about the clapping your hands, I think that was the point at which somebody said they'd never thought about that. And so this is good. I love the
they're going to go practice clapping fast.
I could just see people doing that right now as they're watching this. They're trying to clap. Oh, I could do that. Yeah, and even if you could, that would be as fast as it would have to come down, and that defies any of the other paradigms that people are talking about. It's including explosions and such things.
Right, yeah, because if something explodes, it blows things into chunks, and those chunks have to land. And they're going to, boom, you're going to have something over a period of time, but you're going to have an impact.
True.
And there's no impact. There's just, the surface wave is all that was recorded. And you could explain that with, lifting the weight off the bedrock. It's gonna bounce back, kind of like getting off your mattress in the morning. Mm-hmm. So that because the building went away and there's no more weight on the bedrock, so that's going to create something of a surface wave, and there's nothing beyond that. Because if anything hit, there's no signal that traveled through the earth. Surface waves travel on top, on the surface. There's no S wave or P wave. And with controlled demolitions, you get S waves and P waves. With bombs, S waves and P waves. With earthquakes or with, a building collapse, you get S waves and P waves. There were no S waves or P waves that were detected for any of the events. The two airplane holes, the two buildings demise, and then the third building demise. Mm-hmm. None of those had S waves and P waves associated with the events.
The other thing that people don't know about, or they don't want to talk about, I guess, is the justified vehicles.
The parking lot, the easiest one to see is the parking lot by Embassy Suites that was covered with unburned paper. And the cars had this apparent spontaneous combustion. Apparent. It's not it wasn't shown that it was a conventional fire. Yeah, according to some of the firefighters, water had no effect on it. What I mean by toast is their toast, their history. You can't repair it. You got to get another one. I mean, it's beyond repair. It toasted, destroyed, or damaged beyond salvage. That's what I mean by toasted. Something is messed with.
So whatever took the buildings apart, dustified the buildings, did have an effect on some of the external.
It happened at the same time.
Cars.
It happened right after the building's demise, like immediately after the building's demise. It wasn't during; it was after, and we know that was the timing because there's other things I forget that do that too. But like Patrick Connolly, one of the firefighters, was going to go into Building 7 during the demise of Tower 1, and he decided that wasn't safe, so he came back out, and then the dust from Tower 1 had got up and blocked out all the sunlight, so you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And then he said, thank goodness the cars started lighting up, because then he could see where he was going. And something that most people don't realize, what I mean by directed energy was directed to do something differently than it normally does. Instead of being, the atoms, instead of being attracted to each other, decide to repel each other for some reason. They were instructed to do that. I'm not implying laser beams from outer space or anything nonsense like that. Actually, I've stated over and over again, you can disprove laser beams from outer space because there wasn't any high heat. Yeah, and the stuff didn't burn up. It came apart. the atomic bonds decided to reverse for some reason. So if you've read the book, it usually takes people to 3 times because figuring out what's in there. If you've read it from front to back and, honestly and seriously read it, then at that point you should be sort of graduated to be able to understand what, to know what it is that you know and what's in front of you. Actually, for those teaching elementary school, probably 6th grade would be better. It would be a good book to read for the class. Yep. So it is. Have them do, one section at a time.